Tēnā koutou, nau mai hoki mai anō. Welcome back. This is chapter 4 of the story and history of Te Runanga o Kohuiarau. I encourage you to go back to chapter 1, 2 and 3 to get a better in-depth of the series that I'm presenting to Aotearoa New Zealand and anyone else around the world that would like to know about the mana and sovereignty of Aotearoa New Zealand. This is so I'm going to, in this chapter, I'm going to get my references from Claudia Orange, a book called The Story of the Treaty, and also a book called Hariru, Wikitoria by Brian Mackrell, who put his book out, first published in 1985. And so this picture here depicts a meeting, a meeting that happened in England in 1820, many meetings that happened there. And I want to go back to a story which is found in Claudia Orange's book. And this is a meeting between a chief called Te Pahi, who is from the far north. And so the headings is the Māori people in the British Crown. The governors at the time, or the British Crown representatives, were also in New South Wales. And the governor at the time was called Governor Philip King. And he had a special interest in New Zealand. And so what the governor did, he was sending gifts back to Te Pahi, like iron tools, fruit tree seedlings, and livestock. And because Te Pahi at the time was a leading chief who controlled good anchorage for shipping in the Bay of Islands. So Te Pahi and several of his sons visited New South Wales in 1805 and presented the Governor King with fine clothes and a stone mere. So there was probably an exchange. Now, so King invited Te Pahi and his sons to stay at Government House, and they did so for nearly 3 months. King was impressed by Te Pahi's ability and shrewdness. His relationship with Te Pahi convinced him that Māori and the British could work together. Now, I'm going to go back in my last chapter, and this was the last picture I had. It talked about the two crowns. It talked about the lineage of the British Crown and the lineage of the Taiopuru line, or the Kohuiarau crown line. And so I want to now go to this next picture, and because I'm going to bypass the declaration and the treaty and go to this visit, which Thomas Kendall supported the chiefs and this group to visit Queen Victoria. And in the group were two of the wives of the chiefs. And so in Hariru Wikitoria, in Brian Mackrell's book, it talks about an in-depth account when this group landed with Thomas Kendall. It landed in England. They also took a boat and then a carriage to where the Queen Victoria was. And it gives a quite clear account of when they arrived, where they were in the reception room waiting, and the chiefs were also, and they were lined up to actually meet and greet Queen Victoria. And when she did appear, she walked into the room quietly and easily, but she was also accompanied by royal princesses, Helena and Beatrice, and also a prince called Leopold. And also she had her royal household with her. So there were exchanges taking part. So firstly, a young woman called Ngāhuia was the first to say hariru to the Queen, went up to the Queen. The Queen extended her hand, and of course Ngāhuia kissed her hand. And so this was the order in which that took place with this group. It was all exchanges as well. And there were gifts. So Hirini Pākehā, presented to the Queen a korowai cloak and basically said that, my gracious Queen, while I stand in your presence, this is my word to you. The people of New Zealand are strongly influenced by religion and religion flags. Also, strongly influenced by evil, and to give us your laws for New Zealand because he was fearful of the sentences the Europeans of New Zealand are saying Maoris will be annihilated. Also, in response to was an old Tūharangi chieftain, Kihirini, and he addressed the Queen. My heart was indeed filled with affection towards you. It is only with difficulty that he could express himself and fully sympathise for the loss of Prince Albert. And then went on to talk about what was happening in New Zealand. And so the Queen's response to the chiefs: I am not willing that you should be exterminated. I will ever be mindful of you, for the people of New Zealand are Christians. And also that she is kindly generous towards the Māori people and kindly disposed towards the Māori race. But one of the significant parts of that meeting was when one of the party, Hariata, who was with child, had difficulty in doing a curtsy and a kiss on the Queen's hand. So this is the most interesting part of the interview that occurred between the Queen. So the Queen promised, this is the Queen's promise, which will confer on the future of New Zealand a higher honour than was ever before accorded by an English sovereign to the offspring of an Aboriginal tribe. Her Majesty expressed herself pleased at the prospect of the birth of a New Zealand child of distinction in this country, and requested that I would inform her when the event was near, and she would see the proper attention should be paid to the lady on the occasion, and further, should a child prove to be a girl, to please name the child Victoria, if a male, then Albert. And the Queen also signified her wish to stand as grandmother to the British-born New Zealander. The visitors felt overwhelmed with favours and fairly cried with joy, and this was according to Jenkins, who was part of the party as well. So I'm going to now pull the two crowns together. Now, the picture I had in the third chapter talked about the two crowns. I want to now emphasise on the Kohuiarau line, and this gentleman here, number 7, Taiuru Tainui Waikato, Whare Here Here, also known as Kohuiarau the Fifth. And so Kohuiarau in the 80s was sending letters across to Queen Elizabeth through a government house. And so I'm going to show the first letter. Well, this is one of the many letters in response. So the letter from Government House to Rīria the Fifth was on the 3rd of July 1981. Ko Te Ariki Te Pairu, ko Te Rīria the Fifth. Dear Sir, the Governor-General has directed me to acknowledge and thank you for your letter of the 29th of June, in which you convey to His Excellency your loyal feelings. His Excellency has asked me to say that he appreciates your underlying loyalty to the Crown and Her Majesty the Queen. And so that was signed by the official secretary. The second letter was a letter to Government House on behalf of the Queen, behalf of Queen Elizabeth to Rīria the Fifth. This was on the 20th of January 1982. Dear Te Ariki Nui, ko Te Rīria the Fifth, the Queen has commanded me to thank you for your letter of the 18th of January. Her Majesty much appreciated your assurance to observe the covenant made between Queen Victoria and yourself, your chiefs and their tribes. and that was signed accordingly. So just putting those two crowns together and acknowledging the discussions, the meetings that had taken place, and to put the two crowns into perspective. So the next chapter 5, I will then focus on the Declaration of Independence, but also the significance of the flags and the trade. So what we're going to have here is not only the connections with England, but also the trade that happened around the globe, and also the connections with treaties and covenants. Nō reira, kaore roa mihi atu ki a koutou katoa, mā te wā, hei tūtaki ahau ki a koutou. Nō reira, mā te atu hei manaki, hei tiaki koutou katoa. May the force be with you all, and we'll talk again soon. Kia ora.